In this lecture, we would like to discuss about delimitation of constituencies relating to Lok Sabha or House of People and those assemblies, and in regards to that, why this particular topic is in news as because most of the South Indian states and political parties and some political parties of Eastern Indian states such as Odisha, they have an apprehension of losing parliamentary seats and assembly seats due to delimitation. So they have assembled at Chennai in recently in a call from the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister, Mr. Stalin, and they gathered on discussing about the effects of delimitation and that delimitation of constituencies for the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies is to be carried and out on the basis of the first census after 2026, as in 2021 census was originally postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequently due to delays on the part of the central government. So exactly what delimitation means, the process of fixing the number of seats and boundaries of territorial constituencies in each state for the Lok Sabha and legislative assemblies. It also includes determining the seats to be reserved for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in those houses. This delimitation process is performed by the Delimitation Commission that is set up under an act of parliament. So now we would like to discuss about the historical background of delimitation. The very delimitation process was started in the year 1952, and the first census after post-independent on the basis of 1951 census, the Lok Sabha was having 494 seats, and the very process of delimitation was made under the delimitation of constituencies order of 1951 issued by the President, then subsequently the Delimitation Act of 1952, which was enacted by the Parliament of India, and the very process of delimitation was through the Delimitation Commission of 1952, which was headed by Justice N. Chandrasekhar Iyer, a retired justice, and the very commission recommended the increase of the seats in Lok Sabha to 494, and subsequently the second delimitation process was started in 1963 on the basis of 1961 census, and which ultimately, as recommended by the Delimitation Commission, the Lok Sabha seats were increased to 522 and the assembly seats were increased to 3,771 seats. And the very process of delimitation was begun under the Delimitation of Constituencies under 1961 and subsequently under the Act of Delimitation enacted in 1962 by the Parliament, and subsequently the third delimitation process commenced in the year 1973 on the basis of 1971 census, and the very delimitation commission of 1973 was chaired by Justice J.L. Kapoor, and on his recommendations, the seats of Lok Sabha were increased to 543 and the assembly seats were increased up to 3,997, and it was due to the Delimitation Act of 1972. And subsequently in 2002, the next delimitation was on the basis of 2001 census, but there would be no change. So in 2002, the most recent delimitation commission was set up, and on the basis of 2001 session under Justice Kuldeep Singh, a retired judge of the Supreme Court, as its chairperson. The Commission has submitted its recommendations in December 2007. The Supreme Court on a petition issued notice to the central government asking reasons for non-implementation of the recommendation. So accordingly, on 4th January 2008, the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs decided to implement the order of the Delimitation Commission. The recommendation of the commissions were approved by the then President. The present Delimitation Commission of the parliamentary constituencies has been done so on the basis of 2001 census, which figures under the provisions of the Delimitation Act of 2002. And at present, the Delimitation Commission would exercise its power of delimitation only after the first census, after 2026. And the very historical background further expressed that the last delimitation exercise that changed the state-wise composition of the Lok Sabha was completed in 1976 and done on the basis of the 1971 census. And exactly the Constitution of India mandates that the allocation of seats in the Lok Sabha should be based on the population of each state, so that the ratio of seats to population is as close as possible to bring equal across all states. It is intended to ensure that each person's vote carries roughly the same weight regardless of which state they live in. However, this provision meant that the state that took little interest in population control could end up with a greater number of seats in parliament. To avoid these consequences, the constitution was amended. So, before discussing the amendments, we would like to discuss the constitutional provisions relating to delimitation as per the provisions under Article 82 of the Constitution. The Parliament would only enact a delimitation act after every census. And as per the provisions under Article 170, states also get divided into territorial constituencies as per delimitation acts, after every census. So the very amendment which was carried out in 1976, the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, froze the allocation of seats in the Lok Sabha to the states and the division of each state into territorial constituencies till the year 2000 at the 1971 level. At the 84th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2001 empowered the government to undertake readjustment and rationalization of territorial constituencies in the states on the basis of the population figure of 1991 census. And finally, the 87th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2003 provided for the delimitation of constituencies on the basis of 2001 census and not 1991 census. However, this can be done without adhering the number of seats allotted to each state in the Lok Sabha. So, in regards to delimitation commissions, which we would like to discuss in the very provisions relating to delimitation commissions as regarding their constitution, power and function. So, the commission is appointed by the President of India and works in collaboration with the Election Commission of India. The composition of the commission is with retired Supreme Court judges, Chief Election Commissioner, and also respective state election commissioners. And the very functions of the Delimitation Commission is to determine the number and boundaries of constituencies to make the population of all constituencies nearly equal and to identify seats reserved for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes wherever their population is relatively large, and the various powers of the Delimitation Commission is that in case of a difference of opinion among members of the Commission, the opinion of the majority of the Commission prevails. The Delimitation Commission in India is a high power body whose orders have the force of law and cannot be called in question before any court. So, the very concern regarding Delimitation Commission, its powers and functions that we have discussed, and also the constitutional provisions and the amendments, the constitutional provisions relating to Article 82 and Article 170, and also the concerned amendments, those who were enacted by the Parliament as of the 42nd Constitutional Amendment and the 84th Amendment Act of 2001 and the 87th Amendment Act of 2003. So, now we would like to discuss the very significance of delimitation. So, the very significance of delimitation of parliamentary and assembly constitutions is on the basis that is representation delimitation ensures for fair representation in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies by adjusting the number of seats based on population changes. Also, this is a crucial for upholding the democratic principles of one citizen, one vote, one value. It also having the significance of equity by readjusting the boundaries of territorial constituencies. Delimitation aims to ensure equitable distribution of seats among different regions, considering population as skill over the time. This helps prevent underrepresentation or overrepresentation of specific areas. It also has the significance and benefit regarding reservation of seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Delimitation determines the allocation of reserved seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in accordance with the constitutional provisions, ensuring adequate political representation for marginalized communities. So also, the most important significance that we found regarding federalism, delimitation impacts federal principles by influencing the distribution of political power among states. It is essential to strike a balance between population based representation and federal representation to maintain harmony among diverse regions. And another more significance or benefit of delimitation is regarding population control measures. So, historically, the freezing of seats based on the 1971 census aimed to incentivize population control measures. However, the impending delimitation exercise raises questions about the effectiveness and implications of this policy in the context of changing demographics. Now we would like to discuss exactly the very concerns that is behind the limitation process. And it is among the regional disparity in representation between north and southern parts of India in the Lok Sabha due to population as a deciding factor. The delimitation based solely on population disregards the progress made by the southern states in population control and may lead to disparities in the federal structure. Despite having only 18% of the country's population, the southern states contributes 35% to the country's GDP. The northern state, which did not prioritize population control, are expected to benefit in the delimitation process due to their higher population growth. And also another main concern relating to delimitation is inadequate funding. After the 15th Finance Commission used the 2011 census as a basis for its recommendation, concerns were raised about southern states losing funding and representation in parliament. Previously, the 1971 census was used as the basis for funding and tax devolution recommendation to states. Another major concern related to delimitation is that affecting the reservation for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. The scheduled delimitation and reallocation of seats may result in not only a loss of seats for certain states, but also an increase in power for political parties with their base of support in the north. This could potentially lead to a shift of power towards the north and away from the south. The exercise will also affect the division of seats reserved for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in states as per the provisions of the Constitution, as we found under Article 332 and Article 330 of the Constitution of India. Further, we would like to discuss some of the related events relating to delimitation process. The present delimitation of parliamentary constituencies has been done on the basis of 2001 census figures under the provisions of the Delimitation Act of 2002, the last delimitation process that was carried out. The assembly election in Karnataka conducted in three phases in May 2008 was the first to use the new boundaries as drawn by the 2002 Delimitation Commission. The tenure of the Delimitation Commission lasted up to 2008. The delimitation orders issued by the Commission were given effect itself in February 2008 for most states and union territories, and in 2008 for the Tripura and Meghalaya by a presidential order. The orders regarding Jharkhand were nullified till 2026 by inserting Section 10B into the Delimitation Act of 2002. The delimitation of four northeastern states was deferred due to security risks. The four separate presidential orders issued in favor of that all issued on 2008 regarding Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland and Manipur. The order regarding Assam was scanded on 2020. Subsequently, the Government of India has reconstituted the Delimitation Commission for these four states as well as the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir on 6 March 2020 under the chairpersonship of former Supreme Court Judge Rajendra Prakash Desai. And in March 2021, the four northeastern states were removed from the purview of reconstituted commission. So the next delimitation commission would be after the first census taken before 2026. So now we would like to discuss certain important procedures and manners in international sphere followed in regards to delimitation, as in particularly the international practices followed in the United States of America, where the number of seats in the House of Representatives has been kept at 435 since the year 1913. The population of the country has increased almost 4 times from 9.4 crore in 1911 to an estimated 33.4 crore in 2023. The seats among the states are redistributed after every census through the method of equal proportion. This does not result in any significant gain or loss for any of the states. For example, based on the census of 2020, the delimitation has resulted in no change in the number of seats for 37 states of United States of America. And the international practice that we found regarding delimitation in European Union, in the European Union Parliament, which consists of 720 members, the number of seats is divided between 27 member countries based on the principle of digressive proportionality. Under this principle, the ratio of population to the number of seats shall increase as the population increases. For example, Denmark, with a population of around 60 lakh, has 15 seats, average population of 4 lakh per member, as against Germany with a population of 8.3 crores, having 96 seats, average population of 8.6 lakh per member. So, this is all relating to delimitation, and as it currently a hot topic of debate and discussion among the South Indian politicians, and mostly we found the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin, who in recent past organized a meeting on delimitation of constituency in regards to parliament and state legislative assemblies, where almost all South Indian political leaders and chief ministers they participated, even some eastern states, for example, of Odisha. The opposition political party, that is Biju Janata Dal, also participated in the Chennai meeting on delimitation in apprehension of losing parliamentary seats and also in assembly constituencies. So, in that context, we have discussed exactly what delimitation means and the very historical background of delimitation as it was started in the year 1952 under the Delimitation Act of 1952 on the basis of 1951 census, which shows the figure of 494 Lok Sabha seats, and the second most important Delimitation Act of 1962, which made possible the second delimitation of parliamentary and assembly constituencies in the year 1963 on the basis of 1961 census, which increased the Lok Sabha seats to 522 and the assembly seats to 3,771 seats. And also the third Delimitation Act, that was the Act of 1972, which carried out the third delimitation process in 1973 on the basis of 1971 census, which increased the Lok Sabha seat up to 543 seats and the assembly seats up to 3,997 seats. And the last delimitation of constituencies was done under the Delimitation Act of 2002, on the basis of 2001 census, but there were no significant changes both in regarding to parliamentary constituencies and assembly constituencies. So we have discussed also about the delimitation commissions appointed in 1952 and in 1963, 1973 and 2002. And in context to that, we have also discussed the constitutional provisions relating to delimitation process as provided under Article 82 and Article 170 of the Constitution, and also the necessary amendments to the Constitution made regarding the limitation process passed in the year 1976 by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, and also the second most important amendment, that was the 84th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2001, also the 87th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2003. And also we have discussed the various significance of delimitation and the major concern which should affect delimitation, in particularly the South Indian states which were successful in population control. And finally, we have discussed regarding the international practices that are followed in United States of America, also among the member countries of European Union for the European Parliament, Union's Parliament. So we have discussed in a brief manner exactly what delimitation means and what are the historical background. So also the constitutional provisions and the statutory provisions, those delimitation acts enacted by the Parliament of India.